Our 2015 commencement speaker is a man of great accomplishment and influence. As an award-winning political journalist, author, and host of MSNBC's Hardball with Chris Matthews, Mr. Matthews has earned a reputation for digging deep into controversial issues, providing in-depth political analysis, and challenging Democrats and Republicans alike in his pursuit of truth and social justice. In addition to his graduate work in economics at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Mr. Matthews has been a fellow at Harvard's Kennedy School of Politics and is the recipient of nearly 30 honorary degrees. Mr. Matthews' career has spanned work with the Peace Corps in Africa, presidential speechwriting and press relations, serving as top aide to Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill, and as a Washington bureau chief for the San Francisco Examiner, a position he held for 13 years. The insight demonstrated by his syndicated column for the San Francisco Chronicle led to numerous appearances on high-profile news talk shows. By 1994, Mr. Matthews hosted his first nightly show, America's Talking. As a journalist, Mr. Matthews covered events spanning the fall of the Berlin Wall and the first all-races election in South Africa to national convention and election night coverage here. As an author, his best-selling book, Tip and the Gipper, When Politics Work, has been called a superb tribute to the neglected art of compromise and, according to the Wall Street Journal, is an insightful account of one of history's most celebrated political pairings, the epitome of how ideological opposites can get things done. Mr. Matthews has a deep and special connection to the college, having graduated from LaSalle College High School, a Christian Brothers school in Philadelphia, and then from the College of the Holy Cross. While at Holy Cross, Mr. Matthews met our president, Jim Donahue, who recalls many car journeys and conversations in the rides together from their Philadelphia homes to Holy Cross in Worcester. How appropriate, then, to welcome a commencement speaker who comes to us by virtue not only of his stellar accomplishments, but also from the shared values and enduring relationships that characterize the St. Mary's education. I am honored to present to you our 2015 commencement speaker, Mr. Chris Matthews.
Is that good or bad? President Donahue, Christian brothers, other members of the faculty, my friend Frank Howard, who's here somewhere, who had a lot to do with me coming today. By the way, is this February? I was told to bring sunscreen and sunglasses. It's great to be back to beautiful St. Mary's College. I want to tell you right up front that those speeches you just heard, including the invocation, I think it was the best invocation I've heard, were pretty short, and I'm going to be pretty short. As the great Henry VIII of England said to each of his 7 wives, I won't keep you long. I love anti-Protestant jokes at Catholic colleges. Before anything else, I want to say 2 words to the Christian brothers who are here today, and I met a few of them yesterday and today. Thank you. Thank you for your dedication to students like me and how you educated us, for your quiet, yes, humility. Yes, I had the Jesuits as well. And for being more impressed with the young people you teach than you are with yourselves. As a brother's boy, I know what I'm talking about. So thank you all, brothers. Thank you. And congratulations to the Gale men's rugby team for back-to-back national championships. Let me tell you a little side story of the first Christmas you may not hear or remember from your catechisms. It's an important part of the story. St. Joseph, on the real Christmas Eve, arrives at the inn. And the innkeeper's not a nice fella. And he tells the innkeeper, I really need a room. My wife's pregnant. And the innkeeper says, sorry, no rooms. And St. Joseph tries again, and he says, but she's really pregnant. And the innkeeper says, sorry, not my fault. And St. Joseph says, in words you'll never forget, it's not my fault either. Well, here you are graduating, and most of your life, you had it all figured out. You go from first grade to second grade, you make it to 12th grade, and then you go from freshman, sophomore, junior year, high school, and then you do it all over again, and it's really easy because you can always know what's coming next. And now, you poor SOBs. You don't know what's next, do you? You really don't. A couple of you guys have it all figured out. Oh, I'm going to go to med school. I got it all figured out. Yeah, right. You know, I'm going to be a lawyer if I can find a law firm that's still around. Just kidding. No, I'm not. I like it when the people who got it all figured out don't have it all figured out. So now you're facing terra incognito, the uncharted waters where there's just the abyss in front of you and you have to figure things out. So what I did today, really to make sure that nobody will ever accuse me of repeating a graduation speech, a commencement address, I've actually written a brand new speech, okay? Yes, just for St. Mary's, just for the brothers, I'll do anything. And what I wanted to talk about for just a few minutes was the strange part of life, which is you can't predict it, and the things that you do in life really blow your mind, especially when you look back over them and say, did I do that? Now, you already have done some of that stuff, but I want to talk about jobs. I made a list of all the jobs I've had since being in grade school at St. Christopher's, and before that at maternity BVM, I was at St. Christopher's. And ever since I've been a kid, I've had all these jobs. And you guys and women here have had these jobs already. I'm learning. My first was altar boy, okay? Now, altar boy, I can certainly remember the scary parts of being an altar boy. Convent mass. Now, there was a beauty. You get up before 6 o'clock in the morning. You arrive at the convent before 6 o'clock in the morning, and you're greeted by a face you recognize from school. It's a little scary. Then you go to the sacristy, to the chapel, and the whole time you're serving Mass, you're trying to avoid eye contact with all these people in the dark in front of you. They're the sisters that teach at school and scare the hell out of you. And they're all at prayer together at dawn. It is quite an experience. It's an image most of us altar boys never forget. Then there was Bibury Hospital. By some weird coincidence, St. Christopher's included the largest mental institution in the state of Pennsylvania. And we altar boys got the joy of serving Mass at this place called Bibury. Now, it was quite an experience because you never knew what exactly to expect in a Mass when there were 7,000 people who were mentally troubled all around you. I remember a couple of patterns, however, I really got to like. One was that the patients would all come to the Protestant service and then stick around for the Mass. They saw it as a spiritual double feature. The altar boys had the job of giving a card to each patient when they came to confession. Now, this is old Catholic training. You go to confession every week, you go to Mass, you go to communion every Sunday, very regimented. So you'd give a little card to this patient who's mentally disturbed. And one of the guys who was a patient would always put the card in his missal to keep his place, which is quite logical, you know? Mentally sufficient. He knew what he was doing. And every time we got to communion, it was my job to pull the card out of the place he was keeping in his missal so he would lose his place every week after going to communion. And we'd go through this ritual. Didn't this guy get the drill? We're going to take the card back out of your missal. But then I began to think at the time, I was quizzical and skeptical even then, and I was an arguer even then. I said, who's got the problem here? The person who had the good sense to put that card where he could be of good use to him and keep his place in his missal, or the guys who dreamed up this card system in the first place? My next job was paper boy. I had a huge paper route delivering the old afternoon Philadelphia Bulletin. I delivered, in fact, to show how old I am the day that President Kennedy was elected. It was on the front page of the paper. The hard part, and this is when I learned about jobs, was collecting on Fridays. I dreaded it because, and you know what's coming here, I didn't know where those people were hiding. It was only 30 cents a week, and they would hide. And I would come to the houses, and the screen door was open, the screen door in the back was open, and there wasn't a single person around. And all I wanted was damn 30 cents. That taught me a lot about human nature. In my senior year at LaSalle High School, I got a real newspaper job as assistant editor of the school paper, the Wisterian, which really got me started. If you've anybody here who's been working for your school paper, it is a great way to get started. It is fantastic. I remember back then we had a single record. You know what a record is? We had a thing called a record. It's on vinyl, and they had a 45. I only got one single on there, a solo, big hit. We had one song on our record player in the entire school student newspaper office, Silver Daggers by Joan Baez. And the moderator of the paper had a Volkswagen. This was the beginning officially of the 1960s. As part of the newspaper editors, we all got to go to New York, which is a treat of my life. We went to New York to the Columbia University Newspaper Editors Convention for high school kids. We saw 3 plays. Catch this for inflation. Man for All Seasons, which is still one of the great stories. Stop the World, I Want to Get Off, and 1,000 Clowns, all for $10. Total. That was Broadway. The trip opened up the world to me. I think about it every time I walk into 30 Rockefeller Center to do my show up there. I think about when I first go up, it was because of LaSalle High School taking me to New York to learn about the big world of New York. From then I got a lot of summer jobs like you've already had on the New Jersey shore. I was a drugstore stock boy, boring. I was a caddy. And one thing you learn hitchhiking to the golf course before dawn. You get a lot of mosquitoes, and there's some really strange people that pick you up. Really strange, and I can't even talk about it. It's terrible. I must have been a cute little kid. Just kidding. The other job was opening clams on the boardwalk. Cherry Stone and Little Necks were doable. I couldn't do oysters. I was a busboy and fell in love with the waitresses like every busboy. And then I was a counterman at the local hangout in Ocean City, New Jersey. Same deal, fell in love with the waitresses. I was a house painter. It's where I learned the old carnival trick of wabashing. It's when you mix in a lot of paint thinner. It spreads on really easy, and it washes away in the first rain. These guys were con artists. I was working for the Murray brothers. Bernie, the older one of the Murray brothers, had worked as a roustabout with Barnum and Bailey for 29 years and told me he drank a fifth a day every one of those days for 29 years. He was, of course, recovering as an alcoholic. We would stop for coffee every hour on the hour to deal with the craving. His younger brother, Joe, was more fun to work with. He was still drinking. And my first duty of the morning as a house painter, and house painters are notorious drunks, of course. My first duty of the morning was to get up and turn on the water tap, to get the cold water going for his first chaser of the day when he put down the serious booze to start the day. And then he kept going through the day with a six-pack. He used to tell me, I only drink a six-pack a day. Excuse me, Joe, I'm there in the morning turning on the water for you for your first one. Anyway, it was quite an education. At Holy Cross, I had 3 jobs. One was waiter in the family in the dining. It was called family style. It's a little grubbier than that, 12 people at a table. I was paid 43 cents a meal. Even with inflation, that's not a lot of money in college. In junior year, I got my big break. I got the birthday cake concession. That meant sitting for hours in the Dean of Men's office, writing down the dates of birth of the entire student body, then writing up a sales pitch to send to the parents, buying a supply of stationery and stamps, and mailing up mimeograph appeals to mom and dad a few weeks before the kid's birthday. And boy, were my letters good. You may think your kid's all grown up now, but he gets really lonely around birthday time. We charged $5. Half went to the pastry chef at the dining hall. I think I made about $500 that year on the birthday cake concession. Senior year, I had my best job, RA, resident assistant to the Carter, a freshman. I loved being an RA. It was power. It was great. First time in my life I had any power. I shared a suite with a guy, the other RA, and he had a TV set, which is a big deal back then, and a timed coffee maker for the morning, which was great. I learned that the best way to command respect from freshmen, college kids, is to have some minimal regard for them. Some minimal regard, but not in any way let it show. Don't let them get the idea you want to be their pal. That doesn't work. It was the best lesson in the world because it gave me the experience in command, and it saved me and the freshmen on my floor the trouble they would have gotten into if I'd caught them drinking. Because Holy Cross way back then was real tough on drinking. You were out. I didn't want to get anybody out of college, so I decided to be a menace for 9 months, and they would never drink in front of me. It worked except for once, and I let that kid go. Anyway, the summer I graduated, I pumped gas in the daytime, and I landed a job as a clapping, singing waiter at Your Father's Mustache. That was the old banjo music and pitchers of beer place. I was better at pumping gas, washing cars, and changing oil, and occasionally magically fixing cars when I went out to fix cars. I don't know how I did it. I would jiggle something with the carburetor, and the car would start, and these guys, you're one of those young grease monkeys that can do anything. Well, I could. I was better at that. The number 2 guy, by the way, at my father's mustache, told me, as he was about to fire me, I didn't know how to clap. What a jerk. What a jerk. He said you have to do it on the bone. Or what? I don't clap like that. Try it. I don't know. And then the top guy came to me, and I realized I was only getting Tuesday nights, which I knew I wasn't the coolest waiters there. He said, maybe this isn't your cup of tea. I remembered. You never forget, especially if you're Irish, this stuff. You try to keep track. Anyway, just kidding. Graduate assistant, as part of my financial deal at Chapel Hill, I worked for a professor, monetary policy. I tutored, I wrote the exams, I graded the exams, and I learned one thing about teaching, the little bit I know about teaching. The smart kids always get it right. No matter how tough the question, and then you know you've got the right question, because the smart kids get it. I don't know how. The job taught me also, that job, how scared I was to stand in front of an audience. At LaSalle High School, I was terrified of public speaking class. I was always afraid it's going to be my turn next. In grad school, that professor had asked me to stand in for him one day and give the lecture. I couldn't sleep. I was so worried. I stayed up the whole night. I also miscalculated how long it took to run through my notes, how long to put lecture notes together. 20 minutes into the class, I was without anything to say. Imagine me with nothing to say. The Peace Corps in Africa. For 2 years of my life, I rode a motorbike, a 120 Suzuki, over wild stretches of Swaziland in southern Africa. It's right next to Mozambique, teaching business to small traders. It was quite an adventure. There was a mamba snake. They go 30 miles an hour, attack your nervous system. They gallop like this. They don't squirm, they gallop. They hit you, and they keep biting and biting and biting. They're pretty scary. Anyway, he tried to get in my window. He didn't make it. I was driving too fast. And there was also incredible nice guys I worked with, African guys in their 50s, who treated me like a son or a younger brother. I think that really changed my life, the way those African guys treated me over there. Wonderful people. They always offered me a cold drink, even when they had no refrigerant, no way to make it cold. They always figured I'd like a Coke, and they would find one somewhere. My great accomplishment over there was putting together a big national industrial show, and even the king liked it. There were 4 of us Peace Corps guys who had the job of teaching business in Swaziland back in the 60s. We each had our own province of the country to develop, believe it or not. The Minister of Commerce said, develop economically this province. That was my job. And one guy was natural at the local languages. More important to me, he's been a great and generous friend ever since, a graduate of St. Mary's. He's here with us today. I want my pal Jim Morphy to stand up. He's right over there. We were in this together. When I got home from Africa after 2 years, I went knocking on doors in Washington, D.C., looking for a job, writing for a U.S. senator or member of Congress. And somewhere over there in the hills of Swaziland, it must have been what I decided to do. And when you knock on doors on Capitol Hill, if you ever do it looking for a job, you'll have some strange people you bump into. There was one guy, a nice guy from northern New Jersey, Catholic, Irish Catholic, regular guy, looked like one of my dad's Knights of Columbus buddies. I get in to see him, and he said, look, here's the pen that President Johnson gave me when he signed the latest authorization for the Peace Corps. And he was going to hire me as his legislative assistant right off the bat. And then about 3 or 4 days later, his top aide called me up and said he couldn't work it out. And what I discovered, the reason he couldn't work it out is he was in big trouble. He was mobbed up. Totally mobbed up. They discovered that he had a loan shark's body removed from his basement by the mob. They were keeping it there. I guess they trusted him. Anyway, looking for a job on Capitol Hill was quite an experience. I must have knocked on 200 doors, including the guy who was mobbed up. And I talked to him on the phone 2 weeks ago. He's in his 90s. He's living up in Pennsylvania. He's quite happy. He only went to prison twice. Anyway, when I finally got an interview with a top guy from a senator from Utah, of all places, he'd been a big fan of Robert Kennedy. He had worked for Robert Kennedy in '68 before he was shot. He loved the idea. I had studied economics and had served in the Peace Corps. He gave me my first job in politics, U.S. Capitol Policeman. It'll pay for the groceries, he said. And so during the mornings and early afternoons, I worked at the senator's office answering complicated mail and writing short speeches for the floor. From 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 11 o'clock at night, me and my 38 police special defended our Capitol. And by that September, I was a full-time legislative assistant to a U.S. senator. I drafted amendments to bills, sit next to the senator during debates, and learned a lot. Unfortunately, about the game some politicians play to look good and do nothing, like saying that they're putting on an ironclad ceiling on government spending, which they tried in the 1970s, and then systematically within minutes exempting the entire federal budget from the ceiling. The games they play. My next job was working in a political campaign in Utah, which I loved, then a stint working as an investigative reporter for the great Ralph Nader, then for 3 years as a staffer for the Senate Budget Committee, then came my big break getting a job at the White House and eventually speechwriter to the president, the job I'd wanted ever since I came to Washington. I loved it, sitting on Air Force One. There's nothing like sitting on Air Force One with an old Selectric 2 typewriter, typing speeches that the president's going to give at the next stop. It was a thrill. I loved it. Then for the next half dozen years, I worked as top aide to Speaker of the House Thomas P. O'Neill, Tip O'Neill, which taught me how great leaders like he and Ronald Reagan could actually get things done, saving Social Security from its fiscal troubles then, reforming taxes by plugging loopholes and lowering rates, beginning the Northern Ireland peace effort, and Tip O'Neill in the back room and over in Moscow supporting Reagan every bit of the way. Yes, I give Ronald Reagan the historic credit for what he did. In 1987, with Tip retired, I found myself as president and CEO of the Government Research Corporation, a consulting company, when the job I really wanted arrived. Larry Kramer, executive editor of the San Francisco Examiner, hired me at first to write a weekly column on the side, then as a full-time Washington bureau chief for the newspaper. At the Examiner, I got to cover some unforgettable events. I will never forget these moments. The fall of the Berlin Wall. I hope to never forget a conversation I had with a young East German while standing in the rain waiting for the Brandenburg Gate to open. What does freedom, Freiheit, I took German, mean to you? I asked this young guy. He looked like he was from Berkeley in the 60s. He had long hair, he had an army surplus jacket on. You know what he said to me? He said, freedom means talking to you. And a nurse was standing next to him and said, 2 weeks ago we couldn't do it. The Iron Curtain was real. Or watching the long line of people waiting to vote in South Africa's first all-races election back in 1994. And I interviewed one young woman. And she's standing in this incredibly long, biblical long line that Mandela got people to believe in, democracy. She said, this is the day I've waited for my whole life. I'll never forget the lilt in her voice when she said that word, life. Life. And she was white. Or being in Belfast during the 1998 Good Friday Accords, standing in the back of Ulster Hall, watching and hearing this room full of Protestant working men cheering like hell for peace. And then there have been the show-stopping moments on my show, Hardball, when someone admits something that just stuns me, like the top CIA briefer this week, who said there never was any evidence that Iraq possessed nuclear weapons, despite everything our leaders said and leaders of both parties bought at the time. I was so glad to finally get that fact on the table. I've been to national political conventions going back to Lyndon Johnson's in Atlantic City in '64, to George McGovern's in '72, to Jimmy Carter's in '76 and '80, and here in San Francisco at Walter Mondale's in 1984. One job led to another, although it always looks easier, more graceful when looking backward. Soon after I joined the San Francisco Examiner, I became a nationally syndicated columnist with newspapers carrying me around the country and a political commentator on CBS Morning News. In 1988, James Silverman of Simon & Schuster had read an article I'd done for the New Republic, asked me to write a book about the inside of politics. I called it Hardball. In 1994, I got my first TV show and have been on every weekday night since. I got that job because I went to dinner with a hero of mine from college, author Joe McGinnis, who had written Selling of the President. He'd gone to Holy Cross, too. He said he was meeting someone for drinks afterward and invited me to go along with him. This little incident, I could have said no. I said, what the heck? And that friend of his was Roger Ailes, who gave me my first start as a broadcaster, and I've been on every night since. Altar boy, paper boy, stock boy, caddy, clam opener, busboy, house painter, counterman, college waiter, birthday cake man, RA, gas pumper, singing waiter, graduate assistant, Peace Corps volunteer, U.S. Capitol policeman, Senate legislative assistant, investigative reporter, presidential speechwriter, top aide to Tip O'Neill, CEO, columnist, newspaper bureau chief, television host, and author. You never know where things are going to take you. And the simple rules that happened to work for me, plus God's help and the prayers of my Aunt Eleanor and Aunt Agnes, who are sisters of St. Joseph and prayed for me for 50 years. And it adds up. Those spiritual bouquets have quantity at some point. It's all about a way to make a living at what you think you're good at. And everybody here thinks they're good at something. Find a way to make a living at it. In my case, it's arguing about politics, something I've been doing since lunchtime at LaSalle College High School. I've never, ever changed. People that know me, if they're 30 or 40 years, know I'm the same guy. But I've been lucky to find a way to do it. So here are the rules. And I'm making no good comment here about Woody Allen, okay? Don't write down anybody who's covering this, that I think Woody Allen is a great person. But he has a great rule. He said 80% of life is showing up. I'd say it's even higher. Show up. For the interview, for whatever. If I hadn't gone to Washington looking for that job, I don't think some senator from Utah would have come knocking on my door at my parents' house in Philadelphia, asking what I'd like to do with my life. Show up. Get out there and look. Meet people. It's not who you know, it's who you get to know. My mom always said it's who you know. I said, no, Mom, it's who you get to know. Don't be so yesterday about this thing. You can meet people. Don't be so Irish. Just stop the begrudgment. It's who you get to know. Nobody's coming asking for your dreams. When you put your head down on the pillow at night, they don't really care what you're dreaming about being. Nobody's coming. You have to go. You have to go. And the good news is you're all coming. That's the good news. Because starting today, you're going to be out there hustling your way to the first job, the first chance to do what you want. Show up. Rule 2, ask. Sometimes, most of the time, it comes down to something just that simple, but just that hard, like getting a date for the prom and things like that. I waited weeks. You just put it off. It's too hard to ask. But you have to do it. You got to pull the trigger. You got to say, will you do this? If you see an opening, ask. Show how you can do the job. Lay it out and then ask for it. You know? And if you're a minority or a woman or gay, or you feel that nobody like you has ever had a particular position, go for it. Go for it. Make them say no. Never say no to yourself. And here's something that's not hard at all, and you should do it now. I know this sounds a little romantical, but as my wife would say, a little romantical, but try to get everybody's cell number before you leave today. I mean, it's not hard. This is easy stuff. It's basics. It's blocking and tackling. Well, maybe it's blocking and tackling, really is. But get their number. Especially the one you've been afraid to ask. How's that for romantical? Because besides friendship and true love, one of your greatest career assets you're going to have walking out of here today is each other. The people right here with you today. So stay in touch. Stay in touch. Somebody's going to get an idea, one of your group of your tongue, your clique or whatever. One of you is going to get an opening, and they're going to call up and blabble about it. Guess what I just found out? And you know what? It's perfect for you. I got something, but this is perfect for you. Somebody's going to be your advanced person out there. They're going to give you a break because they heard of something you didn't hear of. You know, this is perfect for you. So we're all mountain climbers. We can think of ourselves that way. We have the ropes connecting each other together if somebody falls. But more importantly than when somebody falls at your age, how about when somebody gets to the top of the mountain? They can help pull you up. So stick together. Third, I should have started with this, being a Catholic school and being a Catholic, but keep your values. Be honest. Try not to be jealous. That's hard. Try to see the good in other people, including the ones you disagree with, including your rivals. Try not to hate. Try to care. And try this one for extra credit. Always do what you're afraid to do. Always do what you're afraid to do. Walter Emerson said that, but you know, it was people like Roosevelt and Bobby Kennedy really tried to live that way. Always do what you're afraid to do. I read this week, because David Letterman ended his career, and is apparently not going to be seen again. He just said, you won't see me again. I take him at his word. He said that he advised Jerry Seinfeld, before there was a Seinfeld. This was his advice to Jerry, before he got his show. Just make sure if you fail, you did what you wanted to. Isn't that great? Because we all fail at times. I was a terrible clapper. It's going to happen. But I didn't really want to be a good clapper. I wanted to argue politics. That's what I wanted to do. Just make sure if you fail, you did what you wanted to. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist, and it's hard to figure out what an existentialist is, but if you listen to this line, you can figure it out. We don't always do what we want, but we're responsible for who we are. So don't get pushed into stuff, because you get blamed, and you'll feel, if somebody tells you to do something, everybody else is doing it, and you do it, and you go, wait a minute, yeah, I am responsible. I did it. We don't always do what we want, but we're responsible for what we are, and that's true tonight. And finally, I just want to do this, and I've never done this before. I was going to say bright day, it's in my script, but it's been off and on. But everybody cheers when the sun comes up. It's like a sunrise service here. We love the sun, don't we? Let's all pray for Pope Francis. He's coming to the country. He's coming to Philly this year in September. It's a big deal for him to come here. He seems to have a sure sense of what's important. He really does. And he can really raise this country's spirit, its spiritual life, its everyday life. I think he's going to have a big impact on us. He's raising this country's spirits just by being Pope Francis. And I think a lot of people think he already has. And on that note, I can't go any higher than Pope Francis. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.